Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Gentleman and we are here to do one thing and one thing only, and that is discuss Dragon Quest IV. For historical purposes, I am using the original NES game, though future remakes will be discussed. The year is 1989. Enix is high on the success of Dragon Quest III, one of the top-selling NES games of all time. The developers have one more 8-bit title in mind. By now you should be familiar with the team. Yuji Horii, designer and writer. Koichi Nakamura, director. Akira Toriyama, artist. Koichi Sugiyama, composer. We are greeted with a gorgeous opening with layers of scrolling, while the classic overture plays, a perfect symbol for Dragon Quest IV's intentions. If the first three games built the franchise's foundation, 4 decides to begin mixing experimental concepts into that architecture. The introduction also shows the game's utilization of the full capabilities of the NES, setting the tone for how everything in the game pushes what a 8-bit console RPG could possibly do. We name our protagonist, choose their gender, with a proper female sprite available this time. And we start off as our hero, except that you do not. Instead, we find the game uses a chapter-based system with different main characters. Chapter 1. You play as Ragnar, the sole playable sword-wielding soldier, homaging the original game. But the first chapter also acts as a microcosm of what Dragon Quest has become. It improves Dragon Quest III's use of NPCs. The king walks in to initiate the scene to tell the soldiers their mission to find the vanishing children. A woman frantically rushes at you, begging for her child to be found before retreating to the guest room and her husband. The fuller understanding of NES technology was used to improve visual storytelling, but beyond that, guards march in elaborate patrol routes, a lone soldier leaves the meeting deliberately slow, and an old man who wishes to join your adventure will follow you all over town. The result is that NPCs and their visuals create a living world that feels constantly in motion. Going even further, each NPC has a sense of identity. The initial factor is the increase in sprite diversity, though that is simply the beginning. The armor shop owner dashes to the counter upon your approach, but he isn't just a shopkeeper. Usually he is with his wife, both worried about their child. He does not only conveniently exist for you. The son's dialogue is endearing, as that is what an older child would say. Flora worries for her missing husband Alex. The day-night cycle contributes with changing dialogue. The child from earlier is scared to go to the bathroom, countering his earlier bravado. Meanwhile, the item shop owner deviously attempts to move in on Flora. Each voice feels individually written and nuanced to create a sense of identity. Each has a life in them to make them feel animated and energetic. Certainly helping is the improved translation, though improved does not mean great and can sometimes limit the quality. Regardless, NPCs more fully feel like real people. Dragon Quest III used town stories and established a player-driven, first-person storytelling style delivered through NPCs. Player-driven because you must actively engage NPCs, first-person as it is done through your avatar, and the NPCs are how you discover the narrative. Moreover, each NPC conveys this not arbitrarily, but with their own experience and point of view which ties into the town story in mind. The last title accomplished this to a fair extent, but here it has become more ubiquitous to every NPC. It feels like they all each build the narrative little by little, while also giving off a sense of self within that world. Not every town has a grand story, nor is every NPC excellent, but each city at the very least has its own identity and light lore, and the NPCs being able to tell you their lore with their point of view on it. Dragon Quest town stories are written to have a fairy tale atmosphere. Every voice is crafted with that series' trademark charm in mind, both affected by while also enhancing that whimsical quality. Overall, this level of writing would become standard for many games in the franchise. But what the fourth game did was expand how these concepts would be used. Ragnar's chapter is a mystery and you must take the role of an investigator, actively gaining information and piecing it together from each individual. In the next town of Izmit, we learn of kids playing with strange shoes, a child vanishing suddenly before their mother, a teacher says to return at night which feels realistic, while also feeling part of that active world. The kids have a friend named Alex, an amnesiac who has recently been put in jail. You must put the clues together and go retrieve Flora, who is able to restore her husband's memory. Overall, the town story NP system allows for a very immersive, mystery-solving experience. To quickly cover the combat, the battles are traditionally turn-based. The game has a good rhythm, everything goes quickly, and is well optimized so battles move at a good pace. The one problem with Chapter 1 is how simple it is mechanically due to Ragnar not having any special skills. Thankfully, this portion only lasts about 3 hours. In terms of monster design, the translation of Toriyama's designs to game are now more detailed than ever. Ragnar's underpass functions almost like an easy tutorial area, not unlike the original game's first cave. Alex's intel brings us to a well. A voice says which way to or not to go, adding a gameplay story dynamic. Hori chose to limit the intricate, winding nature of dungeons, instead implementing various gimmicks which grow and evolve as we go on. While I miss the more extensive designs, they are still sufficiently maze-like with many branches and trollish moments, while growing considerably in complexity throughout the game. Aesthetically, the color differentiation make each visually unique, such as how this grungy green represents an old empty well. You discover Healy, a heel slime who wants to be human. Whereas the Erdrick trilogy's monsters were inherently evil, the Zenithian trilogy attempts to create a world where monsters can be redeemed. Still a rare concept in RPGs. You do not manually control Healy. As a result, his much-needed healing is not always reliable. Events come together with our discovery of these shoes. While traveling to the second town, you could see an unreachable tower on an island, homaging Dragon Quest I. The shoes land us at its top, a satisfying payoff to the clues we have brought together. We land in the middle of ongoing events, again emphasizing the idea of playing through a playable story. We defeat the enemy ordering the kidnapping of children, who is hoping to find the hero and prevent him from growing up. Ragnar's chapter ends how most Dragon Quest games do. No more random encounters in each NPC having celebratory dialogue, but the greater level and diversity of writing improves this overall, bringing the individuality I've spoken into this concept. The last overall element that needs to be mentioned for this game and Dragon Quest as a whole going forward is a sense of mysteriousness. Prior to facing the boss, a dying comrade tells you what he's learned. The line, "Ragnar recalls his words," are simple but carry a sense of ominousness. An example of how Dragon Quest knows how to be literary with so few words, and building the game's overall mysteriousness. The grand conspiracy stretches beyond the border of these events, and the question of what is really happening here becomes pervasive. The tower theme amplifies this with its strange and enigmatic tone, fitting as the tower's hair are often tied up with the game's most peculiar fantasy moments. And this sense of mysteriousness would pervade the game going forward, as well as all future Dragon Quest games in some way. But with the truth that all that has happened, Ragnar is prompted to take his next adventure. Chapter 2, Elena. If Ragnar's chapter reflects one's warrior, Elena mirrors the second title's party, though with a martial artist in the lead. She is the first RPG tomboy princess. The cat we can see serves as a non-verbal guide informing you that one can escape into the walls. Upon escape, she is joined by Pilgrim class Krista Orkiril and Mage Breyer Boria. New for RPGs in 1990 is how each chapter has its own overworld music. Elena's is boisterous, showy, fun, representing someone throwing themselves out there into the world, giving context and personality to her character. Elena's first town story is within a forest village that is being forced to give up its women to be sacrificed. A woman has lost her daughter. The next woman to be sacrificed feels she must do her duty. The boyfriend says she must run away. The mother is bedridden, and the shop owner is too distraught to work. This scene highlights the benefits of Dragon Quest's storytelling. If this were a cutscene, the simplicity of the story would be just that, simplistic. But the experience of being able to see the story through personally piecing together everyone's point of view one by one, with the franchise's style of dialogue, gives the experience a personal feeling. It is also very easy to imagine the boisterous Elena enthusiastically volunteering to leap into the sacrificial basket. And after victory, there is the satisfaction of being able to experience the changed dialogue. granting us a satisfactory conclusion to these events. Whereas Ragnar used the NPC story style to convey mystery, Elena's stories involve learning about and rescuing the towns under her kingdom's dominion. In Fëanor, a fake, though not badly intentioned princess has appeared, and people do wonder why she would bother to appear among them to begin with. The fake is kidnapped and you must dungeon crawl to find and exchange the golden bracelet for her. The boy's dog having gone missing prior to the kidnapping, and it returning with the ransom note is a good active story concept. The dungeon is a basic early game one, perhaps more notable for its difficult enemies than design. It does use stairs and elevations on the same floor, a concept we will see more of in the future. The people do learn she was not the princess, yet they do not ever realize the true princess did indeed walk among them in their hour of need. The following story back at the castle has your father mysteriously unable to speak after having had a prophetic dream, requiring you to obtain birdsong nectar from a tower where elves often visit. In a way, Elena's adventuring has her accomplishing her royal duties and helping her people, done so in a way that she did not see but perhaps she was destined for. Elena's chapter's combat relies on party dynamics. Kirill and Boria give way to buffing, while Elena as a martial artist gives her access to higher critical hits. One concept from the previous title that's been improved are enemies with personality. Oxes can begin battle asleep, bats can be confused, and blazes multiply if you use physical attacks on them. Dragon Quest's monsters already had a great level of individuality thanks to their design, but the increase in battle personality escalates this further. Worth noting is that the grinding for each chapter is necessary and occurs more often than Dragon Quest III, though to be honest it doesn't particularly make sense for each character. Even at optimal levels, the original NES edition is tough, with hard-hitting enemies wielding a variety of skills. The dungeons also have less mercy on you, making you really think about your character's abilities, their synergy, and to plan in advance. The journey ends in a unique way, with you reaching the Kingdom of Endor where the tournament is occurring. The talk and scandal surround Necro Sorrow or Sorrow the Manslayer, up until now the dominant force in the tournament. The gossip occurring without us ever seeing him in person builds an overall sense of mysteriousness, one that is strewn throughout the game. Others, however, speak of the king's rash reward for the princess's hand in marriage, raising the tournament stakes. Elena's chapter, rather than ending with a great evil you must challenge, instead has her living out her dream in a tournament where you control her alone. The arena is spectacular. The fact that the NES is performing at a consistent frame rate is truly incredible. The tournament is quite tense as you may only rely on herbs to heal. The final round is admittedly an RNG-based pain, and I do wish they had formulated a superior final battle. The rumored Sorrow does not show up. The monsters are said to have airily vanished once Sorrow left, and in the next chapter they are said to have mysteriously returned as if they were ordered to, giving encounters an in-story contextualization. Returning home, everyone has vanished from the castle. The lack of music adds a sense of ominousness and mystery, doubled by the fact that this serves as a cliffhanger. Chapter 3. Tornico or Talun. Tornico is living the employee's life, waking up, saying hi to his son, grabbing lunch from his wife, then leaving for work. In the remakes, one questions how a tub of lard such as you managed to marry a woman like Netta, but she characterizes you, saying your dreams of becoming the world's greatest arms merchant are bigger than this job, establishing the character persona you are playing out. And everything in this chapter is about ambition or making money. You can help this old man to the church for a few coins. The innkeep informs you of the safe which prevents money loss upon death. At the weapons shop you sell weapons and collect a percentage of the earnings. You can sell, may choose to purchase a weapon if the customer offers one, and resell the rarer ones for big money, or choose to reserve them to purchase yourself. In certain situations you may even haggle to raise the selling price. But this only gets us so far, so we must grind. Tornico combines the merchant and goof-off classes with average stats, but has high luck, may encounter merchants out in the field, and has a chance to gain extra money, as well as having a greater rate of equipment drops, which of course may be sold for more money. Tornico can also appraise items and equipment you have in your inventory, giving detailed flavor text about whatever it is you find. Overall, Tornico's concept and gameplay is unique and innovative. Once at a proper level and properly equipped, you may search for the safe. Tornico's story is about comedy and haphazard events. His lighthearted theme reflects a merchant just trying to live the Lackaban dream, who ends up bumbling into misadventures. Not only is Dragon Quest IV one of the first games to have puzzles and dungeons, the cave integrates a sense of absurdity into them. You press a button only to be washed away by an oncoming deluge, but it tutorializes you on how situations will be solved in this chapter. You find yourself in an Indiana Jones-style situation with a boulder giving chase even when you change lanes. This serves to your advantage. The final room prevents you from leaving with the safe, but it's nothing a little Zelda logic won't fix. Altogether, it feels as if you are engaging in a playable comedy. Rather than a town story, our humble merchant who only wishes to find opportunities in Endor instead stumbles into a massive political situation encompassing two nations. What's fascinating is how disparate, seemingly unrelated elements come together. The bridge to Endor is gone. Back home, the old man has a dog who belonged to his missing son, which seemed irrelevant. The king of Bon Malmo wishes to invade Endor, while his son has ideas of his own. We come upon an odd town where Dagardi, the man who can fix the bridge, is currently with, well, the less said the better. This lady isn't exactly human. A broadsword here costs only 10 gold. But upon staying the night, the village is gone, and the broadsword is now just a cypress stick. The trickster fox or kitsune refers to a clever, shape-shifting fox from Japanese folklore. The town creatively expresses surrealist elements using typical RPG concepts, such as towns, sleeping, and equipment, manipulating them to simulate a playable story. The castle jail features one of game's earliest stealth moments where we free the old man's son. The riddle of this section is unraveled by bringing the prisoner's dog, again reflecting Japanese myths, to the fox town to free Dagardi, delivering the prince's letter to Endor's princess, the same Elena helped beforehand, leads to a future wedding, thus convincing Bon Malmo's king that an invasion is unnecessary. All these seemingly unrelated elements end up actually being puzzle pieces we engage through interaction to solve the area. Fantasy, comedy, surrealism, stealth, and general absurdity align to create such a unique cross-section of the game. And our merchant somehow ends up averting the death of thousands and brings together true love, while receiving permission to open up a shop for his trouble. Rather than a final boss, Tornico must raise money to purchase a shop. Afterwards, he must procure equipment to fulfill an order by Endor's king, as well as raise money to complete a cave to the east. This section is all about economy, spending money to make money. For dungeon diving, you may hire a guard or a mage to help, though admittedly the chapter is easier than the others. The cave containing the valuable silver statuette hints something must be up with the platforms, leading to this being one of the earliest games to utilize a water raising mechanic. Unfortunately, it's the only dungeon within this section, leaving it the only place to farm. Upon raising the money to obtain your shop, your wife runs the front counter. In any other game, all armor beyond what you equip is useless, but here it serves as shop inventory. In order to raise money, you can do so in combat, sell weapon drops through your shop where you'll get a higher price, buy inventory and then sell it back, with a fan favorite tactic being returning home, buying Swords of Malice, and having your wife, a top level peddler if there ever was one, to sell it back for a huge profit. One flaw is that the inventory really works against you, limiting what you may carry all at once. Upon fulfilling the king's order, the reward is enough to complete the cave. You satisfy the old man's dream and also allow others to achieve their dreams as well. The theme of Tornico's chapter is that in fulfilling your goals, you help others fulfill theirs. The rising tide raises all ships, a fascinating concept for a RPG. And with the Zenithian sword in mind, Tornico moves on to new horizons. We now encounter the beautiful sisters, Mara or Maya the dancer, a kind of mage class, and Nera or Mina the fortune teller, a version of the pilgrim class. Chapter 4. The sisters' goal is simple though not easy. Revenge. Mon Baraba, a town where the nightlife reigns, also shows off those large crowds without any slowdown. The sisters receive both new map and battle music, which express their more exotic nature and dangerous story. The search is for Balzac, the student and murderer of their father, the alchemist Edgar or Mahabala. The NPCs here convey the deterioration of their world while also foreshadowing events. A priest hides a girl who has been summoned to the palace that has been swirling in rumor, while an angry envoy searches the town for her. Your home village, meant to be a reprieve with its simplicity, is oppressed by burgeoning taxes. The port town Havel is as well, along with experiencing regulations on its maritime economy and dissidents being jailed. All this initially seems irrelevant to our quest. But more concerning is that through the personal character interactions we witness quite a bit of self-destructive behavior. In Monbaraba, the people's focus is solely on their own gain. Balzac murdered his father figure. The palace has its female guests living in decadence. A scholar is conducting unorthodox experiments, others act wildly, and all the while the current regent is in hiding. An old man longs for younger days while his granddaughter searches for him. While at night he is completely laid out. Actemto is one of the most terrifying areas of the game. The poison marshes, mournful music, and broken homes craft a suffocating atmosphere that feels so distinct and tangible. Inspection reveals talk of those who have died and those who are dying. The saddest are those who wish to escape, but release a cough at the end of their dialogue, revealing a terrible fate may have already come for them. There are even those who insist on digging further. The total result is that it fleshes out all the contingencies of what could happen to a person in such a situation, allowing the place to feel so tangible and visceral. The most heartbreaking inquiry involves the daughter and son who have come to see their father. She knows of his fate while her younger brother does not. If you choose to enter the poison marsh to examine the corpse, a letter reveals that it is the father. Later, she has decided to not tell her brother yet. The most tragic statement comes from the brother's complaint that it isn't fair that they have not seen their father, perfectly underscoring the tragedy with dialogue that genuinely feels like a child's reaction to events which bewilder him. The sisters themselves are so focused on revenge that they are willing to enter Actemto's minds to attain gunpowder. They are so fixated that they fail to realize how much of a greater conspiracy looms over events they believe are simply part of a personal vendetta. The resulting atmosphere can feel cynical and even be said to grow somewhat sinister. The chapter's primary narrative through inquiry feels like less of a logical through-line, and more like wading through a combination of current events and rumor. We begin by investigating leads for the sake of revenge, but instead learn of your father's discovery of the secret of evolution. We also hear of political controversy and of a corrupt coup, but all this is seemingly unrelated at first. The interactive story consists of learning the Chancellor's weakness and how to exploit it. The actions you engage in while playing as these sisters can only be described as cunning, using the gunpowder to scare the Chancellor, fitting in with the provocative nature of this chapter. The culmination of it all leads to the strange reality that Balzac, with the power of the secret of evolution, is the regent. After the battle, before the sisters can kill him, the true ruler Kilian, Sorrow's lieutenant, utterly defeats you. The sisters, more brutally than Ragnar and Elena, realize they were mixed up in a conspiracy, so much larger and world-encompassing than their revenge. And in your escape, a bard says you must be grateful for being alive, as it allows for another chance at life. The sisters then sail off. The remorseful song of failure is a final emphasis on the emotions the chapter wants to leave us with. Ones of regret, and to be meditative on what it is that could be done next. To conclude the first half of the game, the abundance of sprites serve to make the world feel real, and that extends to the main characters. A large part of what made the cast popular were their designs. The first layer of influence is the box art and manual, granting those who are just beginning the game a first impression of the characters. During this time, Toriyama was transitioning his manga into the arcs that would become the Dragon Ball Z anime, and his Dragon Quest art changed as well. The designs are interesting, full of life, colorful, likable, but most importantly, they give off an immediate sense of personality. We can tell who these people are by simply looking at them. The effect has been so successful that so many artists have paid homage to them. The point is that before we even play the game, the idea of who these characters are has been impressed upon us. The second layer of influence are the more colorful sprites and music. One of Yuji Hoри's goals was for the sprite detail to exude as much personality as the Famicom could handle. Combine these aspects with musical tracks that are evocative of the characters' personalities, and while playing we naturally formulate who these characters are without thinking about it. Despite the mostly silent protagonists, we always feel as if we have a grasp on the people we have assumed the role of. Unique among RPGs is how the individual chapters have nothing to do with saving the world at first. The characters are fulfilling their personal obligations or dreams. They are ordinary people who have worked to become extraordinary. Each one offers a different story and gameplay experience, which works if only because variety is the spice of life. The array of journey types, genre, dungeon concepts, gameplay variety, and NPC types are so diverse and will only continue with the next chapter. Simultaneously, each managed to integrate signposts to the greater mystery to build intrigue. Namely, each chapter mentions sorrow pointing to a looming threat. And each chapter contains an inconspicuous element such as the birth of the hero, the golden bracelet, the Zenithian sword, and the mines, which mean little now, but are actually stealth setups which we will see again later. The sense of temporal advancement is such a new concept. Whether it is the old man selling his shop during Elena's chapter, and how an odd weapon is on sale her party cannot equip, which each do not become significant until Nico's chapter. The gossip on Sorrow continues even after Elena's story is over. There are mentions of Elena's victory far off. Ragnar later appears in Endor during Nico's chapter, and then there is simply the changing, evolving Endor itself. All of this makes the world feel like a real place advancing forward. And advance forward we must. An isolated village in the mountains. A boy training to be a hero. A young female friend. A lost wandering poet. And the invasion he brings with him. The really chaotic movement sells the feeling of calamity. Your friend in a visually powerful moment transforms into you to take your place. The first-person narrative means your point of view is limited to the protagonist. You can only hear the combat. And then the silence is an exclamation point. And then the visual storytelling, as you are allowed to manually walk outside yourself and see the town is now a wasteland. Sorrow has killed everyone you knew. Dragon Quest's proficiency in knowing when to switch from literary to visual allows the impact to speak for itself. This story may give you only so much of your peaceful life, but just that much combined with the visual impact has been powerful enough to remain with players for the rest of the game. And now, you are alone. If Dragon Quest III was about the life of a swashbuckling adventurer, 4 is carrying on the final wish of your violently slaughtered home. Reflecting this is Homeland, a classic among RPG overworld themes, infusing melancholy, loneliness, but also a reminder of the importance of your mission in every step you take. The bitter woodsman allows you to rest in his home, but I will discuss him in detail later. The hero in Branca, a place of many legends, discovers a world dreading an emerging enemy, but one not yet attacking in full force, similar to the last title. Arriving in Endor, we find Endorian ceremonies last for days, a concealed means of saying that it would have been understandably troublesome to program anything past that. Maya and Mina realize who you are and join. The core concept of playing each character's story and learning who they are before they join forces was such an original concept. It remains compelling if just for being a unique storytelling approach. Before we move on, I must say that Endor is one of the greatest Dragon Quest cities of all time. It is a prime example of temporal advancement, an evolving center of so many events experienced through the eyes of different characters. And it was where so many of the rising events of the Heroes chapter was foreshadowed from. We require Hector's wagon to make it across the desert, but he is unable to trust due to a past event. The Cave of Betrayal, where Maya and Mina vanish and we are tricked by impersonators twice, is a clever use of narrative within a dungeon. The interactive style allows us to feel like we are the ones wandering, searching for our new friends, speaking to them ourselves to be tricked, then be surprised when it happens a second time. The scenario serves as a unique way of conveying the test of the new bonds between characters, using a dungeon as a way to not ignore, but incorporate gameplay. This symbol of faith we found allows Hector to realize the truth about his past so he can move on. Now that we have the wagon, I do want to discuss the combat. The combat in the Heroes chapter uses the tactical system. You open with a tactical menu from which we can go into our attack menu. Only the hero is manually controllable. For everyone else, you instead give tactics. On one hand, it does make you feel like a tactical leader, which was the point. And it was revolutionary in that it was one of the earliest auto battle systems. The wagon allows you to switch out anyone at the turn's beginning. Also, people in the wagon gain some experience. A nice quality of life feature. On the other hand, it's simply less fun. The joy of turn-based games is in being able to control multiple people. And without that, it does sometimes feel like the combat is occurring without you. The game lacks the vocation system, instead focusing on personalized designs and characters. Each party member embody a class with pros and cons to create, in theory, a functioning sense of party dynamics. The hero is well-rounded, I imagine on purpose, as you will play him differently depending on your team. Choose no healer and the hero will have to compensate. Choose a mage-focused team and the hero delivers physical force. Not choosing Maya or Borea means the hero will have to be the one who weakens groups. You're also given, again in theory, good party choices. Between Ragnar and Elena, you have the strongest, well-armored but slow warrior, or the slightly weaker, but much faster martial artist with high critical hit potential. Give her the stiletto earrings and she has a chance for 2 critical hits every turn. Between Maya and Borea, you have fire and ice. You have explosion attacks or useful support skills. And between Kirill and Mina, it's either instant death moves or more mage power with wind attacks. They also have a very different setup when it comes to support skills. Tornico is an average combatant, but brings increased money, drops, and high luck. But above all else, his Jester class tendencies arise, with a random chance of him performing a number of interesting actions, allowing him to become quite the wild card. On one hand, the AI is sometimes brilliant to my shock. Maya is an absurdly fast mage who knows how to use her multi-hitting skills. And to a lesser extent, it's true of Mina and Borea. You'll want to be sure to switch to save or no MP at times to prevent wastefulness though. Kirill can be useful as he's willing to use instant death attacks, and Mina can smartly use sleep. They are even smart enough to heal even on save MP, if they know it's an emergency. Elena usually targets the straggler not in a group. The AI is smart enough to use staves in the item menu, so it pays to give them to Ragnar, Elena, or Tornico. This even includes the Staff of Anti-Magic, which they know repels mages. In one instance, Elena knew Maya would sweep, so she healed instead. Your partners will also never hit air and will always auto-target. And yet at other times the AI is completely stupid. Also to my shock, Maya has no sense of balance at times. Maya, you crazy pyromaniac, stop. She overspends MP unnecessarily, even using big MP attacks on a single enemy. And it felt like she became more wasteful over time, meaning I had to keep an extra tight leash on her, which became tedious. I do wonder if it was because some enemies are more susceptible to non-elemental moves. There are times where it's yes, Maya became a dragon, and other times where it's like, Maya, why did you become a dragon? Kirill will sometimes attempt instant death when unnecessary, making him useless in a boss fight which has become a meme of its own. Mina will try sleep a little too much, and Borea is useless because he won't buff when you need it most. While your partners will never hit air, they may target an enemy you did, and your main character does not have auto-targeting. Characters seem to know when to double up, but at times it's hard to tell. And though I complimented their staff usage, sometimes they'll use them when it would have been more sufficient to simply use attack. You have to get used to the eccentricities of the tactics, factoring in what the AI will and won't do. For example, it pays to attack the largest group in case someone targets the straggler. But things like this make me feel like I'm making decisions because of the programming, not because of strategy. You just feel like you're lacking in control at times, and I feel a bit powerless. And there are characters who overall just really don't benefit in the NES version of the game. The mages suffer the most. Physical attackers end up outdamaging them. Magical skills can grow more underpowered as they go on and can miss against later bosses. Though the mage's anti-group utility remains, and Maya's Blaze Most is quite effective once you obtain it. Ultimately, however, people have practically perfected the formula on how a purely physical team can manage to supplement what you usually have mages and healers do efficiently. Despite this, all the party members allow for a diverse enough of well-functioning abilities, as people still discuss the teams they use and why they enjoy using them. Combat, as previously mentioned, is quite difficult with tense situations. Without manual control and even the flaws that I've mentioned, the battles are still quite fair. Your commands are enough that no matter what team you form, you can deal with any situation before you. However, the Heroes chapter does have quite a few harsh difficulty spikes. Certain enemy breath attacks at those points were so brutal that I honestly wanted to tell the game to give me a break at times. To quickly go over encounters, the field ones are fair, but within the dungeons they can become quite high. The increased smoothness of battles may make them more tolerable, but they still could have used some lowering. The next city manages to convey the soon-to-begin open-world MacGuffin hunt in a natural way. Previous RPGs introduced their hunts with exposition from a single important character, but we first learned of the Zenithian sword in Nico's chapter. The build-up continues with how a news hero wore the Zenithian armor, contextualized in a tourist city known for its spa as well as the armor on display. One of the delivery systems, a tour guide, is a unique and smooth means of granting you information. The fact that he's attempting to make you stay at his inn, the more expensive of the two in this town, only serves more to make him feel like a real person. Of course, the armor turns out to be a fake. As we go on, we will learn one must have all 4 pieces to enter Zenithia to meet the Zenithian dragon. Later, we will learn one must have all 4 pieces to enter Zenithia to meet the Zenithian dragon. The result is a more organic and sophisticated narrative conveyance of the classic item hunt. At the port town, the lighthouse has been invaded and is shining an evil light, causing the sea to violently rage, destroying the town's economy. The tower's stifling, oppressive atmosphere is formed by a deep purple representing the evil fire. Not only are the ideas good fairy tale and fantasy, but the visualized air allows the narrative to feel ever-present, as opposed to feeling parallel but detached to gameplay moments. Upon using the fire's serenity, the air dissipates. The whole story is fantastical and imaginative, which fantasy stories should be. With the thankful Nico and his ship in tow, we sail off. Mintos is a town centered on an inn owned by a business genius, but there is not much to say outside of Hector leaving our team and serving as a means to find the sick Kirill. Soretta is another economic story, a kingdom once known for its special herb, formerly its major export. The downtrodden appearance, its attendants having to sleep on the floor, the humble palace, and King having to work the field are visual storytelling elements that make the town feel visceral. The vault is a puzzle dungeon that uses auto movement tiles, making you figure out which ones lead away and towards the staircases and important items to find the route to restore the kingdom and heal Kirill to gain Elena's party. Haville, since we left, has been oppressed further economically. I do lament there is a lack of new dialogue here considering how much detail the rest of the game received. Wide entrance dungeons allow you to bring in your wagon, but I do dislike the game has so few of these. The purpose was perhaps to add more challenge, but the difficulty already allowed for it. More aptly, it deprived you from consistently using a key feature of the game. Returning to Kilian, you face the namesake once more, this serving mostly as a redemption battle. Often noted is the lack of character interactions between party members. While we receive introductory dialogue for Ragnar, the sisters' response to the defeat of Kilian feels notoriously missing. By far, this is the biggest flaw of the game. With a complete party, we receive new overworld music, a way of saying the hero is no longer alone. The seaside village displays the game's dedication to how little is allowed to be superfluous. Despite being optional, the town contains lore of pirate ancestors who eventually settled down there. The pirates use the sandglass of regression to turn back time to win battles. Using clues, you may find their Stone of Drought, which was how they manipulated water to conceal their hideout. The dialogue utilizes high fantasy concepts which are imaginative, while also functioning to let us know such objects can be found within the world. The fact that even minor items are tied to the lore and the dedication to integrate them, towns, and history all together makes them and the world feel more genuinely real. Significant payoffs come from returning to areas from previous chapters. Balzac's monsters now occupy Elena's castle, not necessarily new, but serves as yet another example of the variety of experience in this game, with a civilian place you once knew now functioning like a mini dungeon. Again, the lack of commentary by these sisters or Elena on your victory over him is sorely needed. Returning to doors that require keys as per serious tradition leads to generous goods, sometimes too generous. In terms of NPCs, the commitment to continuity and the advancement of time is impressive. The couple Elena rescued are expecting a child. Orin, ally of the sisters, has survived and may have found love, and the priest and the girl he was hiding have escaped. The narrative continuity to even the smallest and most insignificant of stories is great. Also, returning to certain areas with specific party members will yield different dialogue, a mind-blowing concept for this era, and one that makes the sense of party building even more worthwhile. Primarily, however, for both old and new places, just as each chapter uses NPCs to tell a specific story, Chapter 5 utilizes them to turn the MacGuffin hunt into an information hunt. NPCs provide history, news, and rumor which function as clues as to where they may be. But whereas past games essentially had NPCs that said, maybe try going this way, they have the important thing. Nothing is left without context. Within Serene, rather than a person saying, Stancia is to the north, a whole history surrounding Elena's father and his prophetic powers has been created to convey that information. Stancia is a waterway town, unique among early RPGs and became a franchise mainstay. The legends concerning the Zenithian castle are plentiful here, though we will cover that in depth later. The king requires for someone to make him laugh. You must follow the hints to find the comedian in Monbaraba who surmises the king's true motives, allowing him to grant us the Zenithian helmet. The town story is one of the less interesting ones for its weak premise, as I expected more for the city involving the Zenithian helmet. The people attempting to understand the king's purposes has a decent sense of drama. The people struggling to form jokes is endearing, and lining up behind them did make this scenario feel more real. But ultimately, the lack of any high fantasy intrigue made the story feel flat. Returning to Berland, we receive in-depth knowledge on the Zenithian dragon and secret of evolution. The NPCs engaging in theological questions are worth noting, if just because it depicts the populace as curious and introspective. We hear the kingdom once had the Zenithian shield, but a past king relinquished it to the Queen of Gardenburg in an attempt to court her, harkening back to what I said about the MacGuffins, here rooted in history and international relations. The matriarchal, women-only society grants us various points of view on what it is like to live within that world, though one wonders how they handle marriage, considering men aren't allowed in the kingdom. The town story is one of the less interesting ones, consisting of you being framed for theft and having to temporarily leave a party member in jail, which is inconsequential as you can simply leave who you use the least. The dungeon continues the concept of using elevation and staircases within its serpentine pathways to add a sense of visual and navigational depth to its traversal, and upon clearing our name we gain the final key and the Zenithian shield. The Zenithian armor lore from Anu and an NPC who mentioned a ship that was carrying a particular armor that sank is fulfilled in this cave. The cave uses a mix of traversal with your ship and landing. It also introduces a more unnatural, non-straightforward pathway concept. The royal tomb holding the Staff of Transformation uses the automated tiles, but in a trollish fashion. The first takes you down a floor, then a second takes you to the bottom. You must then figure your way back to the entrance without letting the tiles push you off course. The Cascade Cave itself is a typical dungeon of the time with reasonable dead ends and maze-like tendencies, but more strikingly, it's a technological marvel of the era, surrounding you with all of these flowing waters. Hori, knowing collectibles were a hallmark part of the series, wished to add ones which were not mandatory story items. The result were mini medals which were tradable to the Mini Medal King in exchange for rare equipment. While a great idea overall, his castle not being on your return list, and the medals overflowing your inventory are annoying. Riverton has a unique layout as a river town, though the NPCs serve more to introduce you to what is ahead, as well as educate you about a historical flying vehicle, rather than having its own identity. The Stone Colossus is one of the most thoughtful fantasy concepts in the game, due to how much careful thought was put into it. Each floor takes into account the outer body in terms of shape, allowing you to truly feel like you were ascending and descending the interior. The lore says that the giant must catch its teardrop in its hands. You must walk out the eye and into the hand to find the true path to the control room. An interesting design concept and one that makes you feel as if you played out the lore. The Dire Palace requires the Staff of Transformation to execute an infiltration mission. Firstly, it's truly a testament to the sheer variety of experience in the game. Secondly, the location is brought to life by interactions that could only happen in such a scenario. You get to listen to the monsters and feel like a spy among them. A skeleton. You receive the typical, "It was just a corpse." But then, alas, it was a skeleton monster. And the human prisoners such as the cowardly priests, the thin man, and the lady desperately attempting to lose weight are all hilarious. These are brilliant as the writing considers the particular kinds of interactions that could be created for such distinctive scenarios. If you use the inn at Izmit at any time, you will have a dream of a woman in a tower, a unique means of triggering main story information and conveying that if you search, there is more to find if you choose. All of this using the standard RPG inn. If you follow various clues, you may find Rosaville, a town of monsters, dwarves, and animals, the last of which were granted consciousness by Sorrow. The woman from the dream, Rosa, tells you her story. First, her ability to cry ruby tears is such an inspired fantasy way of crafting a sorrowful backstory. Secondly, Sorrow, who rescued her, is one of the first sympathetic RPG antagonists, and one of the few within the Dragon Quest franchise. Despite having evil goals, the story goes out of its way to describe why he dislikes humankind and what he's protecting. With the ruler of evil or lord of the underworld, while RPGs obviously build tension around their Dark Lord character, Estark's awakening is escalated by how citizens across each town personally deal with the knowledge of his return. You may interact to see their point of view, fear, panic, paranoia, and even how kingdoms deal with it, which due to the improved dialogue feels incredibly personal. If you have visited Actemto any point prior to now, the population has thinned compared to Chapter 4. In our final visit, almost everyone is dead or has left. Time advancement allowed us to see the town at various stages. It feels as if we were personally able to chronicle the town's slow, sad downfall. The revelation that they dug into the underworld is, simply put, a fascinating yet terrifying concept. The designers placed the remaining living and dead miners along the dungeon's main route, as if forming a path to the new portions, using the corpses to create a sense of building tension. The final dwarf hallucinating acts as one last terrifying harbinger, a sore reminder of the dangers of continuing to interfere with something you have not properly gauged the danger of, writ large in the form of having uncovered the master of the underworld's palace itself. The design outside the palace uses unique assets to make it feel as if you have truly entered an endgame style area. Estark's domain has a gold and red tiling to give it a regalness, granting the castle a sense of significance and power. We come face to face with Estark, who is still asleep, even at the beginning of battle. And the fight is actually quite easy, especially with his holy and mental weakness, because this is yet another subversion. Despite being the Dark Lord, he dies. The situation where the one we thought was the main villain dying, but another being the true final challenge, is similar to Dragon Quest III, though with enough differences to remain surprising and a very different context. However, the twist may admittedly be more obvious for modern players. Sorrow, at this point, hears of Rosa's kidnapping, bringing us into the true endgame. With the legendary gas canister, we complete the Riverton Scientist's air balloon. This begins the series tradition that each game should use a different flying vehicle from the last. The Elf Enclave of Elfville is where the World Tree resides, as a dungeon uses its nature as a tree to continue the concept of less natural, non-straightforward pathways forcing you to search across its branches to find your way. Aesthetically, it offers a strong, unique, majestic aesthetic, fitting for the area where we find the Zenithian sword. You also gain a unique party member, Lucia, a Zenithian who fell from the sky who essentially serves as our guide to Zenithia. Godside visually feels like a majestic, holy place, fitting for those with ancient knowledge, and as the area from both which Zenithia and Nadaria may be reached. Build-up in a game must be rewarded, and Dragon Quest IV uses compelling visuals to make it feel truly special. The Tower of Zenithia uses majestic, Greco-Roman style architecture. The design uses a complex array of staircases and separated floors on two halves. These make it a worthy lead into a cloud that allows us to ascend. The culmination of so much anticipation greets us with an image hinted at in the opening, and is now before us with visual flair, the Zenithian Castle. A central aspect of Dragon Quest IV is how it advances overarching concepts across NPCs. In various towns we progress through, which conclude in Zenithia. Elves first appear in Chapter 2, scared of humans. We meet them at various points, and the Zenithian elves, initially skeptical of humans, eventually accept you. Healy introduces the concept of monster redemption. We then see peaceful monsters at various points. We then can speak to Healy, who has become a human. And in Zenithia we see monsters being raised to become human, and gain a monster party member of our own. The mystery of the secret of evolution goes back to the Sisters chapter, with the truth of what it truly is building over time, and learning in Zenithia that Estark and perhaps all monsters may have once been human. As mentioned earlier, components such as the golden bracelet that seem immaterial function in the same way. When they re-emerge without us expecting them to, it allows us to be surprised that they actually have a satisfying payoff within the story. The escalation of terror surrounding the ruler of evil, the slow burn of history surrounding the Zenithian equipment, and the existence of the Zenithian dragon are all treated the same way. These elements are essentially the main story. Build-up and rising tension are common to any narrative. And anyone who has beaten and enjoyed Dragon Quest IV can tell you the story escalated these things. Yet, consider that most of these are not delivered by mandatory cutscenes or are ever forced on you. They are delivered through NPCs at various intervals across many cities, which means that much of the story development is in fact missable. You can go the entire game only hearing the bare minimum story elements or even miss them entirely. Much of the build-up is actually occurring within your own head, with you constructing what you learn, perhaps without ever realizing it. One way to put it is that the progression of story elements must be actively searched for and constructed by the player. But since the game trained you to talk to everyone during Ragnar's chapter, you have naturally been doing this without realizing it. What makes this method satisfying is the agency you have, feeling like a person within that world who is experiencing and uncovering that story. Yet another example is that the story of the woodcutter culminates here. You first found him bitter yet kind. The lone grave outside his home is a visual hint he may have suffered a tragedy. At certain points you may come upon a particular fairy tale. In Zenithia, you receive the conclusion from a woman the player can realize is the hero's mother. Regardless of when you figure it out, there is a satisfaction in personally working out the tragically beautiful cap on this thread. Finally, we meet the Zenithian Dragon. A fascinating turnaround for this franchise is where the first game was a Dragon Quest to destroy a Dragon Lord. This game is a Dragon Quest to find a Dragon God. The dragon has always watched over you. Reminiscent of the story of David, Bathsheba, and Solomon, where a troublesome union was redeemed in a child with a great destiny. The final dungeon gathers all the concepts you have experienced into one place. Unknown passages, trollish movement pads, and indoor maritime travel. The design shape also uses the rather odd, non-straightforward pathways, giving progression an unnerving effect, fitting as we are taken into the underworld, Nadaria, which is given its own small map, granting it a sense of importance and weight. The 4 bosses upholding Sorrow's barrier each represent a different challenge. putting our understanding of your character's abilities to work, while receiving and tanking very powerful hits. Sorrow's Castle is a mini dungeon which functions as an elaborate pathway to the final boss, with its standout concept of placing elevators to fill gaps, including one you must lower, not to cross it, but to ascend and walk on top of it. Upon awakening, Sorrow remembers nothing of his former self. Ironically, the very personality that allowed him to feel compassion for Rosa, which drove him to begin his campaign, has been reduced to a completely monstrous one. Sorrow is visually one of the greatest final bosses of all time. He attacks twice, loses an arm, which allows him only to be able to attack once, which is a nice touch. He loses his second arm, leaving him to only to be able to use magical attacks, but then loses his head, which causes his stomach to become a face in a classic moment. Then he grows new arms, which allows him to attack twice again. Then he grows new legs, until he evolves into his final form. This truly milked the NES for all it was worth to convey the secretive evolution we have repeatedly heard about in a physical, tangible way. The music changes from Estark's theme to an anxiety-filled symphony that represents he has obtained a form beyond the ruler of evil. Moreover, so many final bosses begin with a small human, then grow bigger, bigger, and bigger. Sorrow's transformations are insane, with a personality of their own. But this final battle represents Sorrow's tragedy, which is tied up with the title's themes. The secretive evolution conveys themes of unnatural life, desire, power, and what it does to a person. The game is filled with characters who desire too much and pay for it. For Balzac, the first to use the secret, his monstrous form reflects his terrible greed. For Sorrow, he began as a monster who gained human form to protect Rosa, but became a figurative monster in destroying the hero's village, and now is once more a literal monster. His path towards monstrous behavior, then monstrous form, parallels that of the monsters who attempt to obtain human behavior. And the boss fight itself is no joke. Death comes easy if he's using 2 flaming breath attacks in a row and you are not at full HP. Management of your buffs and debuffs becomes stressful, as you must keep them up as he has the ability to remove them. Ultimately, it's an amazing final challenge. The Zenithian dragon carries you off upon your victory. You unfortunately cannot talk to everyone in each city, perhaps because the developers saw how much that would have been to program. All of the chosen return to their duties and lives. Dragon Quest IV was a game that raised the brutality 3 brought in, while maintaining the series' optimism and hope. A central theme is that of destiny. Each human being has their own story in life, and yet we so often find ourselves coming together to accomplish a larger purpose. Each of us offers an individual talent to a whole, to accomplish a goal beyond the sphere of their own personal world. At the end, the hero returns home. The flowers suddenly regrow where they once were, and Cecilia is brought back to life. A blessing from the heavens after such a long and hard journey. Dragon Quest IV was remade for the Sony PlayStation using 3D elements similar to Dragon Quest VII. Later, these were remade for the Nintendo DS, then mobile devices using a modified, more watercolor-like aesthetic. Each used different soundtracks. The original was sorely missing a boss theme, and Sugiyama fills that void with one of the most powerful tracks he's ever made. Gameplay is, of course, optimized and smoother. The AI tactical system is now optional, allowing for manual combat. The tactics themselves now allow individual settings for each character as well, and the AI has been improved. While the remakes are overhaul grand overhauls, there are a few areas where pros and cons exist between the new and original, such as how the new introduction changes the context of the game. I have a lot to say about the remakes, but I'll save that for a separate video. For now, one huge improvement is how even more refined the dialogue is in granting every NPC personality, sounding more like real people than ever before. The use of accents and localization, however, has been a subject of debate. Those against it feel as if it makes the text too difficult to read, while those in favor believe they add even more personality and individuality to the NPCs. But the absolute best addition is Party Chat. Party Chat allows reactions to every location, event, almost every NPC, and sometimes even other party chats. Unfortunately, due to a number of reasons, it was removed from the DS localization. This makes the mobile version, in my opinion, the absolute definitive version of the game in the West. It is the way I highly recommend playing the game. While Dragon Quest III defined the series' self-identity, 4 refined it thoroughly. Every aspect from narrative interaction to story elements are greatly improved. The chapter system and advancement of time are integrated in satisfying ways. Subversion is not used in an edgy fashion, but to reinvent classic ideas while retaining their heart and soul. And even small ideas such as having a fire mage and an ice mage would be influential on the genre. The NES original was a true tour de force in its time, while the remakes are an updated, more perfect product. Either way, this game earns my Platinum Award as an excellent beginning for a new era in the franchise. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It probably took a whole year off of my life expectancy. Please remember to subscribe, please like and comment for the algorithm lords, and share this video if you can. If you wish to support me on Patreon, you can do so for as low as $1 a month. Thank you for watching, and God bless you all.